In 2014, a team of psychologists at the University of Virginia ran an experiment so simple it sounds like nothing. They put a person alone in a plain room. They took away their phone, their book, everything, and they asked them to do one thing: sit there, by themselves, with their own thoughts for 15 minutes. That's it. No task, no goal, just you and the inside of your own head. But there was one object in the room, a small button. And that button, when pressed, would deliver a real, painful electric shock, the kind these same people, minutes earlier, had said they would pay money to never feel again. You already know where this is going, and it's still hard to believe. Within minutes, people started pressing the button. On purpose. Shocking themselves. 67% of the men did it. A quarter of the women did it. One man pressed it 190 times in 15 minutes. Let that sink in. Given a choice between sitting quietly with their own minds and electrocuting themselves, a stunning number of people chose the pain. Because being bored, truly, completely bored, was somehow worse than being hurt. And here is the part nobody tells you. Boredom is not nothing. It is one of the most powerful forces shaping your life. It has a hidden purpose that took evolution millions of years to build. And right now, every single day, it is being used against you. You are being quietly manipulated through your own boredom, and you almost certainly haven't noticed. So let's ask the real question. What is boredom? Why does that empty, restless, crawling feeling drive a person to shock themselves rather than endure it? And what is it actually trying to tell you? Start with the strangest fact of all. For something so universal, we barely understand it, and we barely even named it. The word boredom is shockingly young. It was popularized in English by Charles Dickens in his novel Bleak House in 1852. Before that, the word as we use it didn't really exist, which raises a genuinely eerie question. Did people just not get bored before the 1800s? Of course they did. Medieval monks, sitting alone in their cells, wrote about a creeping affliction they called acedia, the Noonday Demon, a listless, restless despair that made it impossible to focus or care. And they considered it a serious spiritual danger 1600 years ago. Humans have always felt this. We just spent most of our history without a name for it, treating it as a moral failing, a demon, a sin. We were experiencing one of the most important signals the brain produces, and we thought it was a character flaw. So what is it really? The most useful modern definition comes from a psychologist named John Eastwood, who studies boredom at York University in Toronto. He calls it the unengaged mind. Boredom, he argues, is what happens when you want to be mentally engaged in something satisfying, but you can't. The desire is there, the connection isn't. You're trapped in the gap between wanting to be absorbed in something meaningful and being unable to find it. And that gap can open up two different ways. Sometimes you're bored because the thing in front of you is too dull, too empty, too meaningless to hold your attention. But sometimes, and this is the part people miss, you're bored because something is too overwhelming, too scattered, and your attention can't lock on at all. Researchers Aaron Westgate and Timothy Wilson mapped this out. Boredom strikes when your attention fails or when meaning fails, when you can't focus, or when what you're doing feels pointless. Either one, and the alarm goes off. Because that's what boredom is, an alarm. This is the insight that changes everything, and it comes from James Dankert, a neuroscientist at the University of Waterloo who co-wrote a book called Out of My Skull about exactly this. Boredom, he argues, is not a malfunction. It's a signal, as functional and as vital as hunger or pain. Hunger tells you your body needs fuel. Pain tells you something is damaging you. And boredom tells you something just as important. The thing you are currently doing is not worth your mind. Your mental resources are being wasted. Go find something that matters. Boredom is your brain refusing to let you idle. It's a push, sometimes a violent one, out of the meaningless and toward the meaningful. It is the engine of change. Every time you felt bored enough to quit a job, leave a town, end a relationship, learn a skill, start a project, that was boredom doing its job, driving you to seek more, because some part of you knew you were capable of more.
And this isn't uniquely human. In 2014, researchers studied minks kept in barren, empty cages and found that when finally offered any kind of stimulation, even something mildly scary, the deprived animals lunged for it, desperate for anything to engage with. Boredom is biological. It's old. It exists because a creature that can't tolerate emptiness is a creature that keeps moving, keeps exploring, keeps finding what it needs to survive. But here's where boredom reveals its most beautiful secret. Because it doesn't just push you out the door, it transforms what's happening inside your head while you wait. A psychologist named Sandy Mann ran a now-famous experiment. She made people do something mind-numbingly boring, copying numbers out of a phone book, and then gave them a creative task. And the bored people performed better. They came up with more original ideas than people who hadn't been bored first. Boredom, it turns out, primes the mind for creativity, because when you have nothing to engage with externally, your brain doesn't shut off. It turns inward. It starts to wander. It drifts, daydreams, connects unrelated ideas, replays the past, imagines the future. Neuroscientists have a name for the brain network that lights up in these empty moments, the default mode network, and it's where some of your most important mental work happens. Self-reflection, planning, imagination, the slow background processing of who you are and where you're going. In other words, boredom is the doorway to your inner life. The blank, restless emptiness isn't the absence of something, it's the beginning of something. It's the runway your imagination needs before it can take off. Every daydream you've ever had, every idea that arrived out of nowhere, every plan you quietly made staring out a window, boredom built the room where that happened. Which brings us to the most important part of this entire story, because something has changed, recently, drastically, and almost no one has stopped to notice what it cost us. For all of human history, boredom was unavoidable. Waiting in line, riding a long way, lying awake, sitting in a quiet room. These empty moments were everywhere, and they were where your mind did its wandering, its dreaming, its quiet processing. And then, about 15 years ago, we put a device in every pocket whose entire purpose is to make sure you are never, ever bored again. Every empty second, every red light, every elevator, every pause in a conversation, every moment alone, can now be instantly filled with an infinite, scrolling, perfectly engineered stream of stimulation. We did to boredom exactly what we did to the dark when we invented the light bulb. We conquered it, we flooded it, and we called it progress. But we never asked what we were destroying. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. Your boredom is now a product. The apps in your pocket are built by teams of brilliant engineers whose job is to detect that first faint flicker of boredom and fill it, instantly, automatically, because every second of your attention can be measured, sold, and monetized. You are not allowed to be bored anymore, not because you can't be, but because an entire industry depends on making sure you never are. That restless, empty feeling that used to launch your imagination, it now lasts about half a second before your thumb reaches for the screen and someone, somewhere, gets paid. And so we've done something genuinely strange. We've taken the signal that for millions of years pushed humans toward meaning, growth, creativity, and self-reflection, and we've learned to silence it the instant it appears. We've unplugged the engine. We feel the boredom for a moment, and then we smother it, over and over, hundreds of times a day, never letting it do the one thing it evolved to do. So let's reframe the whole thing. Boredom was never your enemy. It is not a flaw, or a weakness, or a demon, or a sin. It is a message your brain has been sending you for your entire life, in the same language it has used for thousands of years. This isn't enough. You're capable of more. Go and find it. And we are the first humans in history with the technology to refuse to listen. So here is what I want to leave you with. The next time you're standing in a line, or sitting in a quiet room, or lying awake in the dark, and you feel that old, restless itch, that pull to reach into your pocket and make it stop, I want you to try something almost no one does anymore. Don't. Just for a minute, let the boredom stay. Let it open up. Because that uncomfortable, empty feeling is not a problem to be solved. It's your mind, clearing its throat, getting ready to hand you something, a thought, an idea, a question, a plan that you will only ever hear if you let the silence last long enough to listen. The people in that room couldn't sit with it for 15 minutes. They reached for the pain instead. The real question, the quiet one, the one worth sitting with, is whether you still can.